Hello and welcome to MagicGatheringStrat. I'm Peyton. A few days ago, almost a week ago, Cyrulean sent me an email asking me to take a look at his Snake EDH deck. He had been inspired to take this out in paper. He also saw my top 10 underestimated EDH cards video, which there will be a link in the description. And he asked me to see what I could do, maybe help him out a little bit, improve the deck so that he can get it in paper and have some fun with it without too much of a price change. So that's precisely what I did. Basically, what a Snake EDH deck tries to do is power out a bunch of these green snake creatures, usually a very large number. 34 is decently large for creatures in an EDH decks, and it runs things like mana doublers, and it tries to ramp quite a bit and just beat with snakes until you win the game. And that's a very good way to play. Obviously, you want to have some disruption, some instants, sorceries, things like that. You don't want to be relying just on the creatures, but that's generally how snake decks play. And there are a few legendary snakes with which you can play. Things like was a Shisato Whispering Hunter here. He's one. I've only seen one Shisato deck. It was not very good, which is why most people do not use him as a general if they're playing snakes and merely have him main deck. But basically, I took a look at Brennon's deck. I saw he has Sashiro the Anointed as the general. Sashiro is a pretty powerful lord here. That +2/+2 and card advantage is pretty severe. I mean, we've got all kinds of snakes here. Cards like Mireboa can be unblockable at times, definitely. And then you get things like Game Trail Changeling that are going to push your damage because they have Trample. Good stuff like that that lets you get card advantage off of Sashiro while still being huge. Now, the main quarrel I have with Sashiro is that he makes you a bit of a target at times, plus he doesn't survive very much. He tends to get, flame slashed, and he eats a lot of kill spells because that +2/+2 is pretty severe. And that's the only quarrel I have with Sashiro. He's still a very powerful card, and this is a well-built deck. He built it for around $55 in paper, and it's definitely got some good cards in here. It's got both boas, and this is good to see, and that would be Mire and River Boa, two of my favorite cards, actually. I played a deck in Modern that is based around these two and unblockability. That was definitely fun. So I definitely like snakes. I myself had a snake EDH deck a little while back, which sort of inspired some of the changes I made here. The most obvious of which being my general is Patron of the Orochi. This was my choice for a general because the Patron tends to be a lot more synergistic with the snakes, is a lot more powerful, survives a lot more, and just doesn't seem to be as much of an immediate threat, even though it is far more dangerous than Sashiro is. It really definitely, in my opinion, has even more card advantage, especially when playing against a non-green deck. The ability to untap everything at a moment's notice is pretty damn good with the Patron. So, really a great card, really fun to play with. But the cool thing is, he's got Patron main deck, and I have got, wherever he is, I've got Sashiro main deck. And the EDH rulings state that it is perfectly kosher for the pilot of a deck to switch the general, as long as the general is in the main deck and it fits the color scheme and you declare your general before the start of a match. It's perfectly legal. So basically, whatever Brennon feels like, if he decides to pilot this deck, well, he's decided to pilot the deck, obviously. He's going to try to get it in paper. But he can, if he prefers Sashiro, he can easily switch it out. It does not matter in the slightest. Totally the pilot's choice, and that's a good rule. It makes playing EDH a lot more fun, because even if you felt like it, there's... Yeah, Shizuko, even if you want to play something like Shizuko just so that he could get all kinds of mana, that's perfectly legitimate as well. But yeah, so I noticed that he's playing a few cards in here. Actually, I have my changelog here, so I know what I'm talking about. But yes, so I noticed that he has just some cards in here that aren't great. The first of which is, if I could find it, here we go, Tangle Asp. This card I noticed basically essentially Death Touch, But I also know that there's a card that was just printed in Gatecrash called Wasteland Viper. It's also essentially, well, it's a little better than Death Touch in some cases since it technically does not have to do damage. But this guy costs 1 less mana and Blood Rushes. So, yeah, a little bit better. That was the first replacement in that regard. Also, in here I see this is my list, I see he's running a Game Trail Changeling, and there's a Changeling that you can get for not much more that's way better. That's Chameleon Colossus. It's also a 4/4, but it costs 1 less mana. Pro Black is very, very good. I think it's probably better than Trample, and that pump is insane, especially when you're running all kinds of mana doublers. You know, you get things like Gauntlet of Power. So when you're running mana doublers, Chameleon Colossus gets pretty insane pretty fast. Okay, so I also notice he has infect creatures. He has Blight Mamba and Sabretooth Cobra. Sabretooth Cobra is a pseudo-infect creature. It's kind of infect, but not really. So you don't really want to be playing Infect in EDH unless you're playing Skithrix the Blight Dragon, and I've seen actually double striking. What's his name? The Bant guy, Rafik of the Mini Infect. That was pretty crazy. I lost to that in a game on Cockatrice. But other than that, you tend not to want to play these types of cards in EDH. So, and I'm sorry, I'm going to have to keep referencing this changelog. I replaced these two, and this is not in any specific order. It's just sort of how it happened. So Snake of the Golden Grove and Yiva came in my list. So Snake of the Golden Grove was just printed in, if I could find it, yes, just printed in Born of the Gods, and I see it kind of puts your opponent in a strange position. You can either gain 4 life and get a 4/4 for 5 when you play it, or you get a 7/7 for 5. Either way, that's a pretty darn good trade-off, especially since this deck actually is not running too many high-power creatures. Most of them are a little bit underpowered, at least as far as power and toughness goes. So you're kind of relying on the actual big ones, things like Changeling Titan, and then the Lord-style effects like Gauntlet of Power to get damage in. So that's one thing, and Snake of the Golden Grove was one, and Yiva Nature's Herald was the other. Yiva is one of a select few cards that are not actually snakes. They're just a couple in my list. Basically, when you take Yiva, and you've got a Patron in play, you essentially have 2 turns to play creatures. You can play creatures on every single turn. Because the Patron lets you untap all your forest and all your green creatures, at least, well, once per turn, we hope. Yiva lets you take advantage of that spare mana and flash creatures in when it's not your turn. So that can help circumvent summoning sickness and the like. Things like that also get just much more value off of the Patron when you have a Yiva in play. So she's one of those few that makes the cut, the other obviously being this guy. I'll talk about him later. And the Patron himself is the third. So, what have we got next? Oh, yes. So I noticed in his list also he's running some cards that are specifically good just against black decks, and that's Anaconda and where is it? There it is, Krosan Constrictor. So these 2 cards have Swamp Walk and are 4 power creatures, and this guy has a little bit of extra anti-black ability here. But what I'm noticing with these 2 is they just seem to be commons. They're not very good, and they will be practically worthless against some decks. Krosan Constrictor, if this guy gave -2/-2, he would be an automatic include, because he can basically kill black creatures rather than just, knock down their power a little bit. That is really worthwhile. Even if you don't see black in every game, drawing this guy can be a game changer. It can kill off those pesky utility creatures. A Dark Confidant, bye-bye, if only this were true. Sadly, it's not, so these 2 came out, and I did keep Mireboa because it regenerates, and regeneration is a very powerful ability. Its stats are a little more balanced, just a 2/1 for 2, just a better card. So for these guys, I brought in another new card, and yes, so for I also brought in response to taking these out. Yes, here we go. Nemesis of Mortals. This one was also recently printed just in Theros. It's basically a gigantic beater that gets cheaper the more things die. A lot of these guys do not have super high power. I expected that at least some will die, some will need some removal. You'll have to do some chump blocks. They're going to kick the bucket in combat. And basically, a 5/5 for anything less than 5 is worth an uncommon slot in many cases. But the ability to give it Monstrosity 5 as well for less mana is very, very good. So feasibly, if you have 7 creatures in your graveyard when you go to cast this guy, he's a 10/10 for only 4 green mana. Pretty insane as far as the power level there, depending on how much dies. So good stuff. If you get hit with a board wipe, drawing this guy the next turn is basically optimal. Also, I brought in Lotus Cobra. So Lotus Cobra is more ramp. The more lands you play, the better he gets. Just a 2/1 for 2. It can poke in a little damage if necessary. And the ramp you get off this guy is very powerful. Just immensely powerful. Especially if you play something like Explosive Vegetation here, which throws a ton of lands onto the field. You get basically free mana from the Lotus Cobra. Which is very, very good. Definitely worthwhile inclusion. And even though he's a little bit expensive, we're still staying under budget. This deck did not go more than about $20 over Brennon's original price. So the Lotus Cobra, definitely a worthwhile inclusion. So I made only a couple of changes to the land base. 37 is a very good number for land. It's not too much, it's not too little. It seems to be just right. So I took out a couple of those basic forests and replace them with Yanowar Reborn just to get a +1/+1 counter out there. Worth it, cheap, non-basic, good stuff. And Opal Palace, which helps when casting the General. If they've gotten killed multiple times, Opal Palace just gives them a little counter, little boost that it's a common. So they're generally pretty easy to acquire. And I believe they're still under $1, even though they're very, very good. Yeah, so I've already talked about the general switch here, but it really doesn't matter in the slightest. It just doesn't. I changed an artifact. This one's a little bit strange. Caged Sun came out for Sol Ring. Sol Ring's a lot cheaper since it was reprinted. I believe you can get one for $3.50 or $4 in paper. And Caged Sun is a little bit less, maybe. And I just felt that if he's already running Gauntlet of Power, it is better to run that Sol Ring than it is to run the Caged Sun because it's a pretty broken card. This is basically, Disadvantage is the only format where you can play a Sol Ring. And it's a very powerful card. Basically, just a staple. It's good to include staples, especially when they've dropped in price due to reprintings. That's always good. Taking a look at the sorcery section down here, I saw he was playing Desert Twister. A 6 mana cost sorcery that only kills something is not very good. I see good cards in here. Cards like Explosive Vegetation, Harmonize, he's got Kodama's Reach, all these powerful cards. He's got Sasuke Summons. This is an invaluable card in Snake EDH. Just the ability to put more dudes out on the board very consistently, and Time of Need is another powerful card. I can fetch up all of these legendary snakes that all start with S. Very good stuff on here, but especially Endless Swarm. This is a fun card. I love the epic spells. They're ridiculously fun to play with. Basically, you just get to put a ton of snakes into play and hope you have a coat of arms out there too. You probably will win if you resolve an Endless Swarm with a coat of arms in play. Probably. But this Desert Twister just seemed out of place. It's not very powerful. So we replace it with Praetor's Council, which is very powerful. Drawing this guy mid-late game and recovering faster than your opponents from whatever they can throw out, and having no maximum hand size, hint, 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 goes well with Endless Swarm. Yeah, try to resolve this before Endless Swarm if you can, but this probably is not feasible. But being able to have all those resources that have been used up so far, perhaps you would like to resolve another Time of Need, or need another Relic Crush, Relic Crush or Slice and Twain. And just to deal with a pesky artifact, something like that, Praetor's Council is very valuable. The deck curves fairly nicely into it, given that we have all these, ramp-style cards, especially in the sorcery section. Not Creeping Mold, sorry, Cultivate and the like. Plenty of it out there, and Praetor's Council is a powerful card. Yes. In the enchantment department here, I saw this card, Mark of Sakiko. Not the most powerful. A creature has to deal damage, and you get some extra mana. Not worth the spot, in my opinion, even though it is kind of cool and snake-themed. A much better card that synergizes well with the general is the Patron, is sort of the Perons. Pop this dude on Patron of the Orochi, and attack with him. All your dudes will get the bonus. All of a sudden, your opponent decides to go on a blocking spree. All you have to do... Oh, wait a minute. Never mind, that particular interaction doesn't work. Wait, yes it does. All you have to do is use the sword's ability to untap your guy. Sorry, I'm misspeaking a little bit here. Spend the 3 mana, untap the Patron, then you tap the Patron to untap all your dudes, and it also untaps the Patron. He does count as a green creature. His own ability does that. And if your blocking spree fails, because now all of a sudden the bonus has shifted to +0/+2. Kind of a cool little interaction you get, especially with if it weren't for that tertiary ability down there. Would not be the most powerful card. But it's still a great card. It's sort of a half Lord effect, and I found it to be very powerful. I played it in my Patron deck when I had one, and really enjoyed using it. It's a very powerful card. Okay. He's also playing this artifact called Snake Basket, and this one is a little bit interesting, but if it gets stifled, you probably invested too much mana in it, and a Pyroclasm wrecks you, and it would be much better just to have an Adaptive Automaton, I think. It counts as a snake when it comes into play, and other than Sashiro, it was the only snake lord out there. It's not like Merfolk where, I think basically you have 24 lords main deck if you really, really want to, if you play the Automaton and the new Master of the Pearl Trident. But he's going out of style. Master of the Pearl Trident's becoming antiquated. I don't remember when that was a new card. Anyways, going off topic, but Adaptive Automaton, very, very good. Gives a boost to all these dudes, and he counts as a snake himself. Sadly, he does not untap with the Patron since he remains colorless, but otherwise he is boosted if you do want to use Sashiro as the general. Good stuff there. The other enchantment that I felt was good, but could be much better, is Vernal Bloom. It works for your opponents if they're playing green. That's just about it. That's the only drawback this card has. It's just a 4-mana enchantment. Pretty much a mana doubler when you're running this many forests. Even so, not the most efficient spell out there, especially if your opponent's playing green. Plus, I felt that maybe 34 creatures, if you want to abuse the Patron to the max, you want to have perhaps a couple more. So you'll see I have 36 creatures here. That's because I removed Vernal Bloom and did replace it with Vorinclex, and I was able to stay within budget. Basically, Vorinclex does everything Vernal Bloom does, but with the non-basics as well, even though there are only 5 here. These two cycle as well, so they'll probably be cycled anyway. But, yeah, however much mana these produces, you still get the advantage. And it screws your opponent over whenever they tap out for anything, since it basically silences them. Orim's chants them for their next turn, because everything that they used is still tapped down. It's also a beater like nothing else, a 7/6 trample. Pretty good stuff, and it is one of the few, once again, non-snake cards, so it doesn't get that magic boost. But slap a Sword of the Perons on there. Make him a 9/6. Wait a minute. Yeah, 9/6. Definitely. Anyways, that's all the changes there. It still came out to about $77.75, which is only about $20 more than the original price of $55. And I believe that the deck will perform much more powerfully now. It still has Coat of Arms, it's still got Gauntlet of Power, it's got everything that makes the deck good, but just remove some of the cards that perhaps detract a little bit from the ability of the deck to function. You don't want to be attacking with a Blight Mamba if you're only going to be able to get one poison counter out there, whereas I would much rather have this guy doubling my mana every turn. Very good stuff, and I really enjoyed doing this. I hope you guys enjoyed seeing how this works, seeing that it is possible on a budget to take a fun EDH deck and make it more powerful. So I thank you again for watching. If you would like to see more stuff like this, deck doctoring, I believe this is called, perhaps you would like your deck doctored. If this is something you're interested in, post a comment. EDH, even Modern or Legacy. I'm happy to help you guys out. So, for the third or fourth time now, thank you for watching. Goodbye.